Welcome to the show. It's good to have you here at the What's Labs channel. I wanted to talk about salary caps. I want to talk about the different leagues that we have in America. I'm only doing America, I'm not doing Europe, but what are the most popular leagues? Probably the MLS, the NBA, the NFL, of course, the most popular, and the MLB. Those are the ones I wanted to do, so I'm comparing how do they all do their salary caps? How do they keep their leagues competitive? Or do they keep their leagues competitive? Do they even care? Would they rather just have the rich, big market teams just get richer and win all the games? We're gonna find out right now. Let's talk about probably the least popular of all four of these, the MLS. The MLS doesn't make a whole lot of money. Here's how I know. Their salary cap is $4.9 million. That's not a lot. If you think about the NBA salary cap, it's $123 million. But like the NBA, theirs is a soft salary cap. It can actually go up to $9.4 million. It's $4.9 million for the first 20 guys on your roster. Then there are exceptions, and then you can also spend an extra couple $1 million on your reserves. But here's where it gets interesting. Here is the big exception to the rule. Here is where you can actually spend a lot more money on your team. You can sign up to 3 players as designated players. You can sign them for whatever you want. You can spend any amount of money that you want, and it only counts to about like $500,000 off your salary cap, which would be like the best player on your regular roster. So it only counts towards your salary cap a little bit, and you can literally pay them whatever you want. This rule is called the David Beckham Rule, because David Beckham in 2007 came over to play for the LA Galaxy, making $6.4 million a year every year from the LA Galaxy when the salary cap was only like $2 million. He was making 3 times the amount of an MLS roster, which is pretty crazy, and they've been doing that ever since because the MLS is in a position where they're trying to get more eyes on the league, and they decided this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to let any owner spend whatever they want on 3 players that they can add to their team. Go crazy. Spend out however much you want. Just get guys from Europe, big recognizable names, to come over from Europe and get more eyes on the MLS, which has worked, and it's worked really well. So you had David Beckham at first, and now you have Carlos Vela, you have Chicharito. I used to be a big soccer fan. Frank Lampard came over for a bit. I believe Thierry Henry came over for a bit, and it's getting a lot of people interested in soccer. Right now, the highest paid player in the MLS is Lorenzo Insigne. I don't know if I said that name right. I haven't watched soccer in a really long time, but he plays for Toronto FC, and he gets paid $12 million a year, which is wild because the max salary cap, this is the max salary cap, not the real salary cap, but even more than the regular salary cap, is $9.2 million. That's with exceptions and everything, unless you have a designated player. So he's making $3 million more than the max salary cap for an entire team. This seems kind of unfair, but I actually think it's a very brilliant idea because you're saying to the owners, hey, I know you have a collective bargaining agreement with the players, but if you really want to have a good team and you really want to make like a really strong impact on American soccer, you can spend whatever you want on a European player. So if you have a designated player on your MLS team, thank your owners because that's coming out of your owner's pocket. All right, let's move on to the NFL. The NFL has a salary cap this year of $203 million. That's going to be the largest salary cap you're going to see from anywhere in any league. It's a lot of money, but it's a hard cap, so you cannot spend any more than $203 million in any circumstances. There's no way that you can possibly do it. So it's pretty boring. There's really not a lot to talk about on this one. So I want to talk about franchise tags because it's kind of interesting and it has to do with what we're talking about. This is a weird one, and I don't think any other league has this, but if you are a team and you have a star player who is about to become an unrestricted free agent, he's entering free agency, he's played really well, he's ready to go to another team and sign a huge long-term deal, he's ready to get out from under your team, you can say, no, you can't leave. We're gonna franchise tag you for another year, and that player has to stay on that team. He gets paid quite a bit though. He either gets 120% of his current salary, or he gets the average of the 5 highest paid players at his position, which is still a pretty good salary, but it's not necessarily the best, because let's say this quarterback was about to be the highest paid player in the league and sign a 5-year deal. Now he's on a 1-year deal for not the most amount of money, because it's the average of the top 5, which is obviously going to be less than the top paid player in the league. This was designed to have players be more loyal or have a franchise player that the fans can connect to, because it actually doesn't do that. You're just forcing a guy to play on your team for another year when he wanted to be somewhere else on a longer deal and a probably more lucrative deal. So it really doesn't work that way. Or you can do a non-exclusive franchise tag, and then this one is basically the same thing. It's still 120% of the guy's current salary or the average of the top 5 players, but average over 5 years. So it's guaranteed guaranteed to be less money because the salary cap keeps going up. So players are always going to be getting more money. It's the higher of those two options. It's the higher of 120% or the average of the top 5 players. So why wouldn't a team just say, oh, we're going to do a non-exclusive tag because we can save a little bit of money because we're doing the average of the top 5 players over the last 5 years? Well, if you do a non-exclusive, that player can go out and get another offer from another team. And then you have the ability to match that offer. You can say, hey, go somewhere else, go see what you can get. And then he can come back and say, hey, I'm getting a lot of money from this team over here. That team can say, okay, we'll pay you that. And then they have that player. They can sign that player to that deal. But here's a really cool thing that the team can do. If they turn down that deal, if they say, you know what, you can have him. You have that player. We're turning that deal down. That team that signed him owes you 2 first-round draft picks, which is pretty big. In the NFL, a first-round draft pick is pretty huge. All right, let's talk about the MLB. The MLB doesn't have a salary cap, but it does have a competitive balance tax. It has a luxury tax system that works a lot like the NBA's. There are 4 different thresholds. The first one is $230 million, okay? Once you go over that, money is taxed at a certain rate. I'm gonna go over those rates. Then there is another threshold, which is now you're 20 million over the cap. The money after that is taxed at a certain rate. Then you can go 40 million over the cap, that's taxed at a higher rate. And then if you go 60 million over the cap, that's taxed at the highest rate of all. It also has a repeat offender tax as well, so that tax compounds. So your first time going over the tax, if you're past the first threshold, which is 230, you're taxed at 20% everything over that. If you go 250, you're taxed at 32. If you're 40 over, you're taxed at 62.5. And if you're 60 over, you're taxed at 80%. And then this is what it would be the following year. If this is your second time doing it, you're taxed at 30%, the first threshold, 42, the second threshold, 75, the third threshold, and 90, the fourth threshold. If this is your third year in a row, you've been bad for a long time, you've been going over the salary cap and over the thresholds for a very long time, this is the rate you're taxed at. The first threshold, you're paying 50% on every dollar over that threshold. If you're over the second threshold, $250 million, you're taxed at 62%. If you're over 40, you're taxed at 95% of every dollar over that threshold. And if you're over 60, you are taxed at 110% of every dollar over that threshold. So these can add up quite a bit. If you're a repeat offender and you're way into the luxury tax, these add up a lot. For instance, the Mets are at $281 million of their total payroll. This is 50 million over the first threshold, okay? So they're paying a lot in luxury tax. They have the biggest payroll. So they're paying $29 million in estimated luxury tax this year. So they're paying over $300 million in total payroll. That's a lot of money to invest in your team. But I respect it because certainly your payroll, the amount you're giving to the team is way more than 50%. You're saying, hey, I'm willing to give the players way more than I really have to. That means you really want to win. That means you're willing to make a poor business decision in order to win the World Series. But then you have a team like the A's. The A's have a $60 million payroll, which is the least amount you can possibly pay your team. That's where it's set. And the A's said, you know what? We want to suck. We want to be bad. But here's where it gets complicated because every MLB team with TV rights makes $100 million in profit sharing. So the A's make money by being bad. I really don't like this. The A's can say, hey, we want to stay in the MLB. We want to be a team, but we don't want to pay our players anything. We want to pay them the least amount we possibly can, which is $60 million. And we're already making $100 million in TV deals. It's kind of messed up. I really don't like it. Because how is a team like the A's, who's putting in $60 million in their entire payroll, supposed to compete with a team that is willing to pay $300 million, 5 times the amount? How would they be able to compete? It doesn't make any sense. If you're willing to spend 5 times more money on a team, you're going to be better than that team. I don't care what type of moneyball situation you got going on, you're always going to be better. So I do believe the MLB is flawed in that way, and I could see things changing. If you're an MLB fan, let me know what you think of that. All right, in the NBA salary cap, watch my other videos, but it's $123 million. It is a soft cap. There are exceptions. I literally have a video on every single type of exception if you're really interested in that, but it's a soft cap at $123 million. You can spend over $123 million, but you gotta play by the rules. That's the way it works. Check out my other videos. The NHL, I didn't really get super into this one because I didn't realize so many people actually do watch the NHL. Their salary cap is $82 million, which is is really solid, which is like 10 times as much as the MLS. I didn't realize the NHL must make 10 times the revenue the MLS does, which is pretty cool. So $82 million, that's really good. Good for the NHL. That's a lot of money to pay your players, but it's a hard cap. And you'll notice that pretty much in the NHL, it's kind of a new champion every year. They do a pretty good job of keeping a lot of parity in the league and all that stuff, which is cool if you like that. I like a little bit of legacy. I like a little bit of unfairness, kind of gives you the sense that there's an underdog and the underdog can overcome something. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a pretty cool aspect of sports, but the NHL, you do a really good job of maintaining parity in the league. All right, that's all I wanted to do. I'm sorry I didn't do more on the NHL, but there's really not that much. It's a hard cap set at $82 million, and that's all there is. There's no exceptions. There's no fun, interesting rules that they have. So I appreciate you being here. I can slow down now. I'm at the end of the video. I don't need to be concise. So thanks for being here. Be good to your moms.